Hello, everybody. Back from the quarantine, self imposed. I guess not quite self imposed because we're being heavily encouraged to quarantine by our benevolent state overlords. And the logic of these encouragements seems at least putatively sound to me. So I'm abiding by it because I got nowhere to be anyway, really. And so here I am in my domicile, live streaming directly to you with admittedly disheveled hair. Now, I admit that I could have planned ahead of time and gotten a haircut, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago when I clearly needed one. But I'm just not that attuned to my hair related needs. And so I went without. I shunned and abandoned my barber. Not that I even really have a consistent barber, but just speaking about barbers in a general, undefined sense, I didn't do what was necessary in terms of deferring to their authority. And so my hair is what it is, and it could be this way for, I don't know, another month, 2 months, 3 months, 18 months. Who's to say, really? So by the time this is all over, you might not even my face not might not even be visible anymore on these live streams because there's no way in hell that I'm gonna try to cut my own hair. I don't even care enough. So that aside, um, you may have heard that the Senate unanimously passed a multi-trillion-dollar bailout bill called a stimulus or recovery or relief bill, but you could reasonably characterize it as a bailout bill. The TARP bill in 2008 wasn't necessarily referred to as a bailout bill officially. It was a troubled asset relief program. There's that word, relief. Because in times of emergency, we're all looking to the government to provide us with, quote, relief. And so they've relieved us of the ability to have gone without corporate bailouts for at least a little while. Because now we're back in the saddle in that department. And so the estimates range on this from the official price tag, which is like 2.4 trillion, I think, and the ultimate price tag, which could be anywhere from $6 to $10 trillion, or perhaps even more. So think about that: trillion with a T, 6 to 10 trillion. And that's why you saw the stock market jump right back up with glee once this package was in the offing because they were overjoyed. A commenter just referred to it as a stock market bubble re-enhancement bill. Yeah, I mean, that was the short-term impact. And so, for example, Boeing, the weapons manufacturer slash airline industry company, they snuck in their own little carve out worth around 17 billion. And so what they accomplished was basically wiping away all their past corporate malfeasance and mismanagement on the grounds of a national emergency. They have some of the best corporate lobbyists the money can buy. And so, at a key time, they finagled themselves a massive bailout. And I find it interesting and annoying, more annoying than interesting, really, that you have conservative pundits who, to the extent they have any problem whatsoever with this bill, they're screaming about how there was a couple million for the National Endowment for the Arts and for the Kennedy Performing Arts Center. And it's just like, okay, I agree that shunting those things into an emergency relief package is kind of ridiculous, but let's not miss the forest for the trees. This was effectively a bailout of a huge portion of the American corporate sector. When what's clearly needed right now, given the unprecedented skyrocketing unemployment, given the fact that people can't work in restaurants, they can't work in other service jobs, can't do much of anything. If you're not like me, where you derive most of your income, if not all of it, from sitting behind a phone or computer, if you have to actually go out and do things, you probably can't get paid right now. And so those people needed immediate, quote, relief. And so what did they get? Well, they get a one-time payment of $1,200, which is like, okay, I guess that's helpful. But imagine if that were the priority from the beginning. I think in that case, they would have passed a clean UBI of the kind that Tulsi originally proposed. Maybe they could have debated the precise amount. But Tulsi's bill had the UBI installments monthly. This is just a one-time payment, so they have to go back and reconvene in Congress potentially in a month, depending on how the situation unfolds, to give us another $1,200. And hey, I mean, I'll take the $1,200, but it's not about me, really. I could do without it. I'd gladly relinquish the $1,200 if it meant not being on the hook for years, if not decades, for the entire U.S. corporate sector, which, again, got to just whitewash all its malfeasance and corruption in one fell swoop at taxpayer expense. Because although it's the Federal Reserve printing money, ultimately that redounds to the taxpayer, whether in terms of inflation, whether in terms of other budgetary adjustments that have to be made in accommodation of this. So, I mean, the $2 trillion is taxpayer dollars overtly, and then the estimates range because we don't know exactly how much or to what degree the Federal Reserve is going to leverage its lending power. So we had a 96-0 vote in the Senate late at night. 96-0, which should automatically raise suspicions when there's ever unanimity on this type of thing. There wasn't even unanimity on TARP. I mean, if you remember the debate over the Recovery Act in 2009, the so-called stimulus, that legislative process was painstaking. They did have to dispatch Joe Biden to twist arms in the Senate, and they only got 3 Republicans to vote for it, if I'm remembering correctly. I think they got Susan Collins, Olympia Snowe, both of Maine, and then Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, who then switched and became a Democrat anyway, and then lost his re-election bid, and then died. But all of a sudden, like magic, in the midst of a pandemic, we have this incredibly rushed process for one of the most consequential pieces of legislation ever in American history, the biggest bailout ever in U.S. history. Let that sink in, to use the obnoxious internet cliche. I don't know, it just took a couple days somehow. I mean, it's amazing. Imagine if they were this efficient on other matters. So it was 96-0 because 4 senators were in quarantine. I think that the only 2 senators who may have possibly voted against this corporate bailout were Rand Paul and Mike Lee, but because Rand Paul tested positive for coronavirus and he had interacted with Mike Lee, they both had to quarantine. In addition to Romney, who definitely would have voted for it. And who's the other one? I think it was John Thune, if I'm not mistaken, who left town early because he said he was feeling ill. Yeah, John Thune, Republican, South Dakota, who's like I believe he's the majority whip in the Senate. Let me double check on that guy. Yeah, majority whip. See, I know crap like this because what else is there for me to know? Um, yeah, so there was no registering of any dissent whatsoever in terms of the vote total. You had Bernie Twitter erupt into euphoria yesterday and today because Bernie gave a melodramatic floor speech about how he was going to stand up and make sure the unemployment provision wasn't altered. First of all, he didn't insert that provision. That was Chuck Schumer and Michael Bennet. But really, it was all Chuck Schumer who was working in concert with Mitch McConnell. That's why you got a 96-0 vote. But Bernie got to have a little viral moment. His supporters got to, profess a certain flattering narrative about how Bernie, I don't know, stood up to the bailout in some way, even though he didn't. He stood up to ultimately meaningless procedural arcana having to do with a couple Republican senators um, objecting to what they claimed was a textual error in the bill, which turned out not to be an error. I mean, it made no sense. So what Bernie in a way did was almost like placate his supporters into backing this bill because they feel like, oh, they got something out of it with unemployment protections. And it's just like, nah. I mean, if you didn't want to support the corporate bailout bill, you could have just not voted for it, rather voted against it. And Bernie did not do that, nor did Elizabeth Warren or Sherrod Brown or any other of these so-called progressive luminaries in the Senate. I mean, the term progressive is so diluted of meaning right now, it's like not even worth using, except ironically and with contempt. Um, so this is the whole ball game. The House isn't really going to have a real vote because they can't bring everybody back. They're all scattered throughout the country. And in order to have a full roll call vote, it would require that you get 435 people in a room together, which is a pretty clear violation of social distancing. And some of those members are right now positive for coronavirus and ill. So that's not happening. The whole ball game was the Senate. And so, it's over. I think, Pelosi wants to get this through on unanimous consent, and she only needs to do that with a quorum. So we'll see how it unfolds tomorrow. So yeah, biggest corporate bailout in U.S. history. You and me are on the hook for a huge percentage of the entire corporate sector. Weapons manufacturers got in their little sweetheart deal. And we're going to have to, manage the fallout of this for probably years and decades to come, just like we did with the TARP bailout. So, good job, everybody. Pretty darn convenient that a pandemic affords the opportunity for corporate America to, again, have the slate wiped clean in terms of their own malfeasance. And you could say, oh, yeah, corporations employ lots of people, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, they do. That's right. So then bail out the people who work for the corporations rather than the corporations themselves. And even if you do have to provide some industry support, do that later on. If this is your first priority, that says quite a bit. Also, congratulations to the United States of America for having the most coronavirus cases. I know that's an imperfect metric. It might even be a misleading metric because who knows at what scale they're testing and all that kind of ambiguity. But if we're going to use that metric for anything, we do not have the most cases. Deaths are increasing exponentially. So, good job, everybody. I can't wait to hear from the American exceptionalists about how America is the greatest country on earth, yet its response to a pandemic was pathetic, at least compared to other nations. South Korea, Japan, arguably even China. I mean, give me a break. Germany, Australia. I mean, none of those countries are perfect, but nowhere near the S show that is now transpiring in America, where we're going to have horrible situations not only in New York, and I'm pretty much in New York City, so this is affecting me. New Orleans, Atlanta, Miami, of course, Seattle, and who knows what it's going to look like in 2 weeks. So, I mean, this is a little bit of a predicament for the American exceptionalist dead enders who want to make it seem like we're the perfect and most perfect and best at everything when clearly we're not. So, good luck with that. All right, I'm going to scan my super chats. I'm not going to do a super long one tonight as I am tired. And I was considering not even doing a stream. But, I owe it to you, my random anonymous commenters, to fill you in. See? Chris says, always look forward to your live stream. Well, thank you. I always look forward to your appreciative comments. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for now because I'm going to go and into bed and fall asleep within about 5 minutes. Good night.